Good afternoon and welcome to Fresh from the Grove. This is Joey with the Grove Center for the Arts and Media, and I'm so glad that you're joining me for today. Today we're going to be covering a great topic, one that I think that will really help you in your creative life as an artist. It'll help you personally because it will identify key areas in your life where you feel stuck or that you're not growing. So today specifically, I want to talk to you about this topic of creative resistance and the war that goes on between us when we go to create our art. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about the war of art, and it's all about breaking through the blocks and win your inner creative battles. It's written by a gentleman named Steven Pressfield. It came out a number of years ago. A lot of people have talked about it, and why? Well, they talk about the war of art because it's a great book, and it's a book that's really going to help you today. So as you're just listening in now, I'm going to give you a couple of resources at the end of the broadcast today. At the same time, I'm going to be talking specifically about the war of art, how you can get a copy, and why this book will, I think, make a tremendous difference in your life today. If you're listening to the replay and you find this is helpful, just hit the share button and let other people know about this broadcast, because in the artists that I've worked with at the Grove Center for the Arts and Media for over 15 years now, I have found that creative resistance to be a common theme regardless of who the artist is. So whether you are a dancer, a writer, a filmmaker, a musician, a sculptor, a ceramicist, a photographer, an actor, whatever type of art you practice, creative resistance is all about those forces both within us and those around us that really prevent us from pursuing the creative calling that we have in our lives. So let me start with this quote by Steven Pressfield. Steven Pressfield says, "Most of us have two lives, the life that we live and the unlived life within us. Between the two stands resistance." Let me say that again. Most of us have two lives, the life we live and the unlived life within us. Between the two stands resistance. And Steven Pressfield in The War of Art talks about resistance as this force that's designed to shove us away, to distract us, to prevent us from doing our work. And let me begin with just a personal story. Most of you know that I'm a writer. I write books and screenplays. And in the past couple weeks, I've encountered a tremendous amount of creative resistance for a novel that I'm writing. I'm about 200 pages into it. I probably have about 200 or 300 pages more to go for the first draft. So it's going to be a novel about 400 to 500 pages. But I have found in my own personal life that one of the greatest ways that I encounter resistance from my writing is by the other ideas that I want to pursue. So maybe you're an artist and you're thinking, oh, I've got this idea for a book, and I've got this idea for choreographing this type of dance. I've got this idea for a painting, all these different ideas. Well, that can be really good because it stimulates you. But when we go about our work in the beginning of the day, we have to decide what line we're going to draw in the sand, where we're going to start, and what we're going to work on. We have to live by priorities. I recently read that when anyone tells you that they have 5 or 6 priorities, they're probably deluded or they're probably liars, because priorities are like arms. We only have really 2 of them, and one of them that's really useful, whether we're right-handed or left-handed. So to have all these multiple scattered priorities in our creative life, it really dilutes the good work that we can do one project at a time. Well, let me talk a little bit more about what Steven Pressfield says in The War of Art. And if you're just tuning in now, we're talking about creative resistance and the war of art. What are those forces that really keep us from pursuing our greatest hopes, dreams, desires, for that creative life to really succeed as an artist, to thrive both personally and professionally. So let me just give you some definitions of what Steven Pressfield talks about in his book, The War of Art. So resistance is this self-generated force. It's self-perpetuated, and it's really the enemy within us. And if you've lived for any length of time, you all know what I'm talking about. I recently did a FaceTime Live. Maybe you want to go back and listen to it. But I did this FaceTime Live. I called it, are you listening to the shitty committee in your brain? And so all of us have this shitty committee. We could also call that resistance, as Pressfield does. But it's the enemy within us. It's that part of us that says, or we might say to other people, gosh, I'm my own worst enemy. And so it's self-generated, it's self-perpetuated, and there's parts of Pressfield's book that I really enjoy, and why I'm recommending it as a great book. There's other parts that I think he just missed about the whole human condition, and that's part of what I want to speak to as well. When Pressfield notes that resistance is the enemy within, I think it really comes down to, especially if you consider yourself a Christian, a follower of Christ, he's really talking about living with an undivided heart and how we get split down the middle and we really can't decide which passion, which art, which project we really want to pursue. It's really evidence of a divided, scattered heart. Well, Pressfield goes on to say, he says that resistance is insidious. It will tell you anything to keep you from doing your work. Resistance is always lying. It's always filled with crap. And again, that goes back to what's the conversation that we have in our mind? What lies are we telling ourselves? What do we say that really keeps us from doing our work? And resistance exhibits itself in all sorts of really little behaviors. Let me give you an example from me. When I sit down to start writing for the day, where I've blocked out 3 or 4 hours just to write, I can say, oh, I need to send one more email. Or, oh man, I am really thirsty for another cup of coffee, so I'll go make myself a cup of coffee. Or, wow, I didn't take my vitamins today. All these little ants that just nibble away our time, our resources. And if you've really experienced resistance like I have, you know in your core, in your heart of hearts, that there's this inner tearing going away at your spirit when you're just not sitting down and doing, 1, what you want to do, 2, what you're called to do, 3, what could really make this world a more beautiful place by you making a creative contribution to it. So hit the pause button for a second. If you have a comment, if you've got a question, if you want to give a shout out, I'd love your comments and questions as we're talking about how do you see creative resistance alive in your life, in your art. What does it look like? And again, if you're listening to the replay, just post your comment. I'll respond to these comments. Other people will respond to them. Let's get a dialogue going here. So Pressfield likens resistance to famous movies we've seen, like The Alien, The Terminator, The Shark in Jaws. It's an engine of destruction designed to discourage us, to lead us to this place of despair where we just say, why even do my art? Why does it even matter? Other people don't seem to care, so why should I care? And it operates with this cold indifference that you're just a number on the place of on this place on the planet, and your contribution, it really doesn't matter. But the thing about resistance is when you're encountering that creative resistance, again, whether you're sitting down to paint for the day or you're going on a film shoot, maybe you've got time blocked out to work on some songs that you're writing, creative resistance will always butt up right against that creative thing that you want to do. So it is always pointing you to true north, as Pressfield says, and it's showing you in the direction that you want to go. But again, you're facing this force, this invisible wall that's really preventing you from doing it. So one thing to consider, and one thing that you might find helpful, if you think you are alone in facing creative resistance, that's a real sign of that resistance at work in your life, because we tend to isolate and we tend to think that nobody else is experiencing what I'm experiencing. The other artists I know, they just get in and they have flow and it's always good, and that's just simply not true. Every artist encounters creative resistance. And think about life in general. If you want to go on a diet, you're going to face resistance. Any human endeavor designed to promote your growth as an individual, as a follower of God, of someone who really cares about family and friends, and you really want to be someone who's a positive contributor to other people's lives. Everybody faces resistance. And so again, whether you want to get into the gym or just start walking, whether you want to go on a diet, maybe you just want to spend more time reading in the evening instead of watching TV. Whatever it is that you've set a goal out to do, you're going to hit resistance to the goal. And the fact that you hit resistance, it means that you're human, because we always face these forces against us. But at the same time, it's pointing you in the direction that, hey, you've set a goal and you want to go for it. So let's talk a little bit about it. What fuels creative resistance? Resistance is fueled by fear. And this is a really strong point of what Pressfield points out, is that it's fueled by fear, and that fear comes within us because we begin to ask ourselves questions. Well, gosh, what if I was to become successful as an artist? What might happen then? Well, that's fear speaking. Or what happens if I spend 5 hours working on songs today and they just turn out to be terrible songs? That's fear at work. Hey, I'll say hi to Prentice. Good to see you, brother. So glad to have you on. Prentice Dupin, he's one of our creative funding filmmakers, and I want to give a shout out to you, Prentice. He filmed a great movie, short film, 20-minute film this past year called Last Stop. He's just getting it into film festivals now, and it's so perfect that you got on now, Prentice, and I just want to congratulate you and applaud you, because he assembled a great team of co-workers and other filmmakers, producers. They went out and raised a lot of money to get the short film, and he was a great example of how to have a dream, how to write the script, how to build a team around it, how to shoot it, and now get it into festivals. And so, Prentice, I just want to say the topic that we're talking about today, it's so perfect, because I'm sure if I were to interview you right now, you would outline obstacle after obstacle that you faced in creating this film, and at the same time, what were the resistance factors that you overcame to get it made. And so if you want to jump in here with a couple comments, I'd love your feedback, because well, Prentice says, to God be the glory. That's awesome, because we know that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. So I'm sure you've got a lot of examples, but I'd love to hear probably the number one factor you faced in terms of resistance to getting this film made, and what the people listening and reading your post might say there. So when you got a minute, just shout that out. We'd love to hear from you. So back to this idea of resistance. And if you're just listening now, we're talking about creative resistance and the war of art. We're talking about Steven Pressfield's book and what you can do to overcome the creative resistance that you face in your life. Let me talk about a couple more points that Pressfield brings up. One of the key evidences of fear and creative resistance is a word that is familiar to all of us. It is the word procrastination. And procrastination is the most easy thing to rationalize, because we can say, I am going to write, I am going to paint, I'm going to dance, I'm going to call that agent, I'm going to look for a place to host my festival. Whatever creative endeavor you're going to do, I'm going to do that tomorrow. We're going to put it off another day. And one day falls into the next day, falls in the next day. We get sick. You know, we have a mom or dad that needs some help. All these things begin to spiral. And a month has gone by, and we haven't moved the ball downfield, 2 yards for what we want to create creatively. So procrastination, it's the easiest thing to justify and rationalize and explain away why we're not getting the work done. So I want to ask you, what is the number one procrastinating behavior that you have? If there's just one thing that you can isolate that leads you to procrastination, what is it? And I'd also ask you, what fear is it tied to? Because doing work and doing work well, it's hard work. And sometimes as artists, we think it's going to be easy. When I sit down at the computer at the beginning of the day and that screen is blank, there's no words on it, and I've got a goal of a certain word count for the day, and craft the story, seeing those words lay out a certain way on the page, at the end of the day, I can only answer to myself. Did I accomplish that writing goal or not? I have no one to blame, and if I choose to procrastinate, that's on me. And so, as artists, we can help sharpen one another by asking ourselves tough questions and saying, hey, you had this goal, what kept you from pursuing that? And then, not taking one another's excuses. I was with a buddy the other day, and he was talking about how there's all these other different organizations that are so well funded, and these nonprofits are doing good. And I got in my buddy's face and I just said, hey, what organizations are you talking about? Every nonprofit I know needs money and is struggling to some degree. So I just got into his grill because he's a good friend of mine. But he was facing resistance by making these rationalizations and excuses. And so when we get in each other's grill, when we ask ourselves the tough questions, we're really sharpening one another. We're making each other better people, better artists. And again, if you've got something to say, I'd love a comment, a quote, a question, jump in here. Let me share a couple more thoughts, and I'll wrap up in a couple minutes here. But one thing that Pressfield identifies that I thought that I really appreciated is that one way, and because a lot of artists are strong feelers, they can allow themselves to get in the spot. And it's the place of self-created trouble or self-drama or victimhood, self-sabotage. It's when we use these whiny, cheap, passive-aggressive ways of resisting our works. We want to blame other people. We want to be a victim. We want to say, oh, it was my parents' fault, or, my boss is too hard on me, or I had a hard day. So we can sometimes slip into these passive-aggressive ways of whining and complaining, all these negative ways of self-sabotage that really get in the way of doing our work. Hey, I want to bring up a point that Prentice brought up here, and I'm just going to read what he wrote here. Maybe some of you could see this. He wrote regarding his film project called Last Stop, it may be a surprise, but the biggest fear I face was what happens not if it fails in creating the art, but my biggest concern was succeeding, then failing because the next, and I didn't see what the next is, but I think I get where you're going with this, Prentice, is oftentimes our biggest fear, our biggest concern is in succeeding, and we have a fear of success. And what would happen if I worked really hard and sweated it out and honed my skills and became the best artist that I could be? What would happen if I succeeded? Well, gosh, you would have a great opportunity to produce a lot of good for others and help others along the way, as you probably had people help you along the way. Let me point out a couple key things, because here at the Grove we talk about cultivating the spiritual life of artists as well as the creative work. So I think one of the key areas that we see resistance play out is it's linked to these false images, these false ideas of who we think God is. And so oftentimes we live with a misconception of who we think God is, and that contributes to the creation of a lie that is absolutely false. So oftentimes you'll hear these subtle religious sounding things that may sound good, but they're a load of crap. We may hear things, well, maybe I shouldn't practice my art because I should be serving the poor, as if serving the poor cannot be done, as well as practicing your art. But we have these religious ideas of maybe I should be going to Bible study instead of practicing my art. Or God would not want me to be selfish by practicing my art because it's just for me. So maybe that might be a lie that you could relate to. Or if I do succeed in my art, maybe I'm going to become prideful and God's preventing me from becoming prideful, and that's why I'm not succeeding. And so we blame God for our lack of success or our lack of commitment to our work. Maybe we have bought into, and I've spoken to this before, specifically on the Facebook Live I did on listening to the shitty committee in our brain. But maybe it's tied to a lie or a wound from childhood, something that a parent said, maybe a teacher, a coach, a mentor, someone who gave us a critique that just made us feel like we'd just been barbecued. And so our false images of who we think God is and our false images of either wounds or lies that we've grown up with, all of those things really create stronger fears and a higher level of resistance. And just yesterday I was talking to a very good friend of mine. He's one of our board members here at the Grove. But we had this really dynamic conversation about what is this inner conversation that's going on in our minds, and what is the conversation that we have with ourselves that keeps us from being more creative, that keeps us from engaging our imagination, that keeps us from really pursuing that dream we want to pursue. So we're going to talk about that in the next couple of Facebook Lives. We're going to be talking about what is that inner dialogue in our hearts and minds. What does that look like? So I'm going to wrap up here, and I do want to mention a couple things that I think you'll find helpful. One free gift that we have, maybe some of you have gotten it already, but if you haven't, it's a free video ebook, and it's filled with 20 essays by artists of all different disciplines. That ebook is called Create: Transforming Stories of Art, Life, and Faith. And as we talk about creative resistance today, and as we talk about you really pursuing your dreams, I think as you read other people's stories, you will discover, hey, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who deals with obstacles and struggles and problems in my creative life. I can do this. And so this ebook is filled with all these wonderful stories by other artists, and I think you'll really find some of your story in their story. So that's one of the very first things I want you to consider, and one way to overcome creative resistance in your life is really to have a heart-to-heart with someone that you're close with. Read other artists and creatives that inspire you, because by learning their story, you'll find, gosh, where do I want to be in my own story? So that's one free gift that's available to you. And I do want to share what Prentice just brought up as well. He said, to address my procrastination, I use time management and accountability, other writers, and an accountability group where I post weekly updates on my progress for my 3 goals for this week. You know, that is such a great example. Prentice, I'm just going to break that down. So he looks at his time management, which involves what are his key priorities for the week. He has accountability with other people. He's identified 3 goals, and I would imagine, Prentice, those are written goals, so they're very clear and measurable. Those are very specific ways to help anyone move in a direction that they want to go. So thank you, Prentice, for posting that. Last thing I want to say before I wrap up is the creative resistance you experience, you're normal, it's natural, you're human, so don't beat yourself up over it. However, I do want to encourage you to pursue your hopes, your dreams, desires, and to overcome your fears. And if you haven't heard about it yet, we developed a great video series for you it's simply called What Are Your Greatest Hopes, Dreams, Desires, and Fears? And it's an 8-video series offered by The Grove that's designed to really help you with practical strategic action steps to moving forward. And I think if you go through this video series, you're going to see that you will identify very specific goals and action steps for the creative life you want to live. And so I encourage you to go to the Grove's website, pick it up at our Grove online courses. There's other free products available for you there. But I want to thank all of you for listening today. Prentice, for your comments, for participating, and shoot me an email. Visit the Grove website. It's at www.thegrovecenter.org. We'd love to hear from you. If this has been a helpful Facebook Live, I encourage you to share it with others, and let's pursue our art together, encouraging one another, and overcoming that resistance that we face every day. So God bless you. Have a great day. Thanks so much. Bye now.